Fast. There we go. Then we've got John, who's a veteran of 29 years, and we've got Noah and Luke, and they're here enjoying the Capitol today. Let's have a big round of applause for the Ganser family. Enjoy the day. There's a lot of folks running around the building here today. We have some bill introductions. I'm going to have Senator Erickson up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have RS 1299 dealing with fetal development presentation in schools.
Committee, any questions or objections to introduction of that bill? Seeing none, that bill is introduced. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other bill introductions? I think Jason Watkins may have one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Watkins on behalf of Sedgwick County Commission requesting, smeared it on my hand, I think it's 25 RS 1021, and that deals with dates for special elections, municipalities, and school districts.
Very good. Committee, any questions or objections to introduction to that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none. Committee, Angela sent out minutes on January 23rd, 27th, 28th, February 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 10th for your perusal. And are there any questions, discussions, or a motion on the minutes? Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd move that we approve the minutes as listed in on our agenda.
Thank you, Senator. And we have a second by Senator Thomas. So motion to approve the minutes and a second by Senator Thomas. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion carries and the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. We have a bill hearing today. Senate Bill 260 has to do with Kansas parimutuel racing. And I will have Jason Long give us a quick bill overview. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 260 does make various amendments to the Kansas Parimutuel Racing Act. This is the act that regulates and governs horse and greyhound racing and simulcast racing in the state of Kansas. The bill makes mainly changes with respect to horsemen's associations and horsemen's nonprofit organizations and getting licenses to race horses in the state of Kansas, and also the distribution of revenue from different sources of racing and how that's going towards the racing industry in the state of Kansas. Just to walk through the bill, the first changes are to the definitions of horsemen's association and horsemen's nonprofit organizations. You can see those changes on pages 2 and 3 of the bill. The changes take out the location restrictions for those entities. They're on page 2, and then on page 3, currently they are racetracks located at Eureka Downs, Anthony Downs, or adjacent property to a fair association that's conducting fair activities. Under the new definitions, these entities could exist and applying for licenses to conduct horse races at racetrack facilities located anywhere in the state. Section 2 changes some requirements for an organization license. This is a license to conduct the actual horse races under the Act. Currently, entities can apply for an organization license if they conduct not more than 2 race meetings a year, hold those race meetings in the same county where the organization is located, and have not more than a total of 40 days of races in any one year. The bill removes the county location requirement, so that would no longer apply to these entities. It would then add some additional requirements that if it's a fair association seeking an organization license, then it must be approved for the license by the Kansas Quarter Horse Racing Association and the Kansas Thoroughbred Association, or it can be approved by one of the horsemen's nonprofit organizations for that license. And then there's also additional caveat on page 6, paragraph 4. If the applicant for the license is a horseman's nonprofit organization that's going to do live racing, then it cannot conduct that live racing prior to March 1st of 2028 unless it's conducting races at Eureka Downs. So some specificity with respect to that type of licensee there. Section 3 changes the distribution of monies in the state racing fund. These are monies that are received from all the wagering and admissions taxes, application license fees, and all fines that are collected under the Parimutuel Racing Act. Senate Bill 260 would direct that 30% of the revenues from historical horse race machines be transferred to the Kansas Horse Breeding Development Fund, and 70% of such revenues be transferred to the Horse Fair Racing Benefit Fund. For those of you who have been in the legislature last few years, recently there was legislation that was enacted to allow historical horse race machines to be operated in Sedgwick County at a racetrack facility. Those are machines that basically allow players to place bets on a machine that then runs a random historical horse race. And so it generates anonymous horses that the player would bet on without knowing what race it's actually running again from history, and then pays out accordingly on that. So these revenues would be distributed in this fashion under Section 3. Section 4 changes distributions of those monies that go to the Kansas Horse Breeding Development Fund. Those are currently earmarked out for about 5 different purposes under the bill. There are some changes, however, with respect to a stallion and breeders awards that are paid out of that fund, just to change and open up more to the discretion of the Racing and Gaming Commission as to which owners of stallions and dams or mares could be paid those awards for success of horses bred from their horses. And then Section 5 changes distribution of monies from the Horse Fair Racing Benefit Fund. Again, there are some prescribed uses for those monies, basically on reimbursement of various costs associated with regulating and conducting races and doing some purse supplements, capital improvements for racetrack facilities. Under the bill, it would earmark 15% of the monies in that fund for the promotion of parimutuel racing industry in Kansas by horsemen's nonprofit organizations. The monies in the fund could also be used to pay the costs related to any lease agreements for land or equipment to conduct races. That's a new allowable cost under the fund as well. All of these amendments will go into effect this July 1st if the bill is enacted. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, Senator Francisco, thought you were going to get off easy, Jason.
Thank you. Since this is a change to the funding that you described on page 7, can you just remind us where the funding would go if this is not enacted?
Oh, yes. I've laid it out in the memo summarizing the bill. I laid out in bullet points what the current law funding goes to. For the Kansas Horse Breeding Development Fund, those monies are currently used for purse supplements for Kansas-bred horses, stakes and awards paid to owners of winning Kansas-bred horses, the Stallion Award, the Breeders' Award, and then equine research that's being conducted in the state. For the Horse Fair Racing Benefit Fund, those monies currently can be used for, there's an earmark of 25% for capital improvements to racetrack facilities. Then there are various reimbursements of the costs associated with regulating and conducting races. There are some purse supplements made for certain race meetings, and then there's a basic operating assistant grants for organizational licensees who are conducting the races. Those are the current uses for monies from the fund.
Mr. Chair.
Follow up, yeah.
So if some of those funds are now used for that overseeing responsibility, would there be any left for that?
I don't know what the breakdown currently is for all those different uses, and so if there is money taken for the promotion of the racing industry, as shown down at the bottom of page 8, I don't know how much that would take away from the current uses. We'd have to get into some of the fiscal analysis on that.
Thank you.
Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, on 2 and 3, we lined out specific locations, Eureka Downs and Anthony Downs. And then on page 6, we seem to give the horses at Eureka Downs a head start. And there's no mention of Anthony Downs. So was that negotiated by the parties, or maybe the conferees could answer that? Or?
I'll have to defer to the proponents on the bill on that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it very much. We have proponent testimony. I'm going to allow about 20, 25 minutes total for this, so we can get everybody. And I think Senator Fagg wanted to speak. I don't know if you're prepared to do so first, since you may have to go to another committee meeting. So we'll bring Senator Fagg up. And welcome to Fed and State.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure being here today. I just want to tell you that I'm a proponent of this, that when you look at the Eureka is in my district. I'm District 14. And the group that you see with the different, all of them been working together. This is a compromise deal, and I don't know anybody that's really an opponent of this at this point. So they've been working on this for a while and come up with a great product. And the Eureka part of it, you know, with the 3-year, that makes sure that there isn't somebody else that goes starts one up somewhere else right off the bat and asks for money on this. This gives us a little time to make sure that works, but it's a compromise, so it opens it up down the road so that can happen. The Anthony part, Anthony is no longer there, so there won't be anybody on that part. So with that, any questions?
We'll let the Senator stand for questions. Senator Clifford, I don't know if you wanted to re-ask yours on this one or not.
No, it's well answered, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I understand it's a housing development now.
Is that right? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the Senator? Seeing none, thank you, sir. We'll move on. Our next in-person proponent is Dr. Dwayne Droege. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. I'm not sure.
Droege, that's right.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a representative from District 13, and Eureka is in my district. And it's a privilege to speak in support of Senate Bill 260. It's a bill that would codify the horse racing benefit fund. This legislation will reignite the industry that has deep roots in Kansas. In this state, horse racing dates back 150 years. Eureka Downs is the oldest track west of the Mississippi River and the only remaining racetrack facility in Kansas. In the past, the industry generated thousands of jobs and millions of dollars in economic benefit to Kansas. I assure you the City of Eureka, Kansas and Greenwood County Fair Association are excited to bring these rural economic development dollars back to the region and the state. Codifying this legislation will return what was once over $100 million a year industry to the state. I urge you to pass Senate Bill 260 out of committee with a strong yes. Thank you, and I would stand for questions.
Do you have to be at another committee meeting?
I just left one. It might still be going.
Okay. Well, we'll open up the questions very quickly for the representative in case he needs to run. Seeing none, I think we're in good shape. Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you, committee.
Next, we have Justin Staton, Kansas Horse Council. Justine, I'm sorry. Misread. It's early this morning.
Quite all right.
Thanks.
Yes.
Welcome, Justine.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Chairman and Committee. So Kansas Horse Council, Justine Staton, I'm the Executive Director. We are essentially the voice of the equine industry in Kansas, and so we are absolute proponents of bringing racing back, because when we had our last the first economic impact report was done on equine in 1996, and it showed we had some 6,400 horses just in the racing sector alone. And since then, of course, all that business moved out of the state, and when one horseman can spend $1 million in hay in a year for his racing horses, we want that money back in the state, of course. So this would be a boom for our agriculture. This would be a boom for commerce, for the rural community dollars and jobs that it would create. This is also an opportunity for our colleges to start training up and turning out more enthusiasts in the equine industry. So there's just everything to gain and nothing to lose by supporting this.
Thank you, Justine. I think we'll hold for questions until we have all the in-person oral testimony, and we'll open it up to the committee. Up next, we have Jason Watkins from Golden Circle Historical Racing. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason Watkins here on behalf of the Wichita Golden Circle. It's actually the Park City Golden Circle. Revisor Long mentioned that a couple of years ago you changed state law to allow for historic horse racing machines. You did that as part of the bill that legalized sports wagering. And I think the revisor did a great job of explaining what those machines are and how they work. Just for the benefit of the committee, that is going in the old Wichita Greyhound Park up in Park City, Kansas. It's a 3-story building. It's a complete gut and remodel. The project started out at $55 million. The budget is now at $135 million. So it is going to be a big entertainment venue in South Central Kansas. This bill, in large part, deals with where the tax revenue from HHRs go, and that's set out, the tax rate is set out in the Kansas Constitution. The first thing that happens in this bill is the money that's generated on that tax goes to cover the oversight of that HHR facility. The remaining money is then split between those associations as is outlined in the bill. We want to be on record as saying we are 100% supportive of that. We're excited about getting the Kansas horse industry and horse racing back to something that's wonderful in this state. It's a huge economic opportunity, so we're happy to participate in this, very supportive of the underlying bill. With that said, we have approached the other proponents. There is an amendment to the bill that is necessary. A few senators have asked questions about language that was struck in terms of geographic locations. When this legislature legalized historic horse racing machines, they authorized 1,000 machines to operate in Sedgwick County. That is us. We're going to have 1,000 machines. When you struck the language of Anthony and Eureka Downs, and basically they can apply for racetrack facility licenses, if you look at the definition of a racetrack facility license in current law, it lists things that you are eligible to do, and among those things is operate historic horse racing machines. So Revisor Long has prepared an amendment that just clarifies that there's only one location in Sedgwick County that can operate historic horse racing machines. And I think it's pretty simple. He can explain. I didn't see it till this morning, so my testimony, which needed to be turned in Friday morning, doesn't include the amendment because it wasn't done yet. But again, I have talked to all the proponents. We've talked to the Racing and Gaming Commission. Believe everybody's on board and supportive of this. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Jason. Up next, we have Peach Maddle. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Model.
Thank you.
I'm butchering names left and right this morning.
No,
Peach,
it's
sorry
good.
about
It's good. It's good. Peach Model. I'm with my husband Ted, Shay Harmon, and Mackenzie Reynolds. We operate a small farm in South Douglas County, and we raise crops and we raise some cattle, and we've been playing with horses for a little bit, and that's our love. This bill would help our farm. It would help many of our small farms. We're just a little under 200 acres. We have lush pastures. We purchase all of our feed, comes from our local elevator, and it's feed that was harvested in our area. Our grass and our hay, our alfalfa comes from our area. We're fortunate to be so close next to all these resources. In doing this, we currently probably only have about 10 brood mares, and then we're standing a stallion for someone right now. But there will be people from other states that will want to come and be a part of this program, race their horse. They will have to domicile their horse and it foal in the state. So just like we've all spent those of us who have raced before money in other states, we will have people come and spend money in our state. So we're looking forward to expanding our current farm operation. This will be very helpful to us, and the greatest thing about it is we'll be doing something we love very much. And thank you.
Thank you, Peach. Our final in-person proponent testimony comes from Kurt Eck. If Kurt's here.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Kurt Eck. I'm from Andale, Kansas, and my family has bred, raised, and raced American quarter horses for over 50 years now. I'm here on behalf of that family and friends in western Sedgwick County and eastern Reno County. And I'm also a member of the Kansas Quarter Horse Racing Association. Our board consists of members from as far west as Coolidge, as far north as Concordia, over to Manhattan. We have a board member in Kansas City, Kansas, down to Neosho Falls, and down to Independence, and obviously the Wichita area as well. So we represent a lot of folks across the state who are very interested in the passage of this language. All the folks that we represent have a very similar story to tell, and that is talking about the days gone by when we got to watch our horses run in the state at Eureka, Anthony, and the Woodlands in Kansas City. Now the conversation usually starts, what state are your horses in? Or how was your trip to Oklahoma, or to Iowa, or to New Mexico? All those states have a robust racing industry that is supported by various forms of gaming entertainment. Those states have passed negotiated agreements with racing entities, and clearly it has paid off with the economic impact that they see in those states. As a reminder, this legislation, very similar legislation, was passed out of this committee last year, passed on the Senate floor, and passed through the House, only to be vetoed by the governor. As Jason had mentioned, there was an issue with the language that didn't allow for the regulatory costs to get paid out of this, out of the tax revenue, and it would have put that burden on the facility operator in Wichita. And so we've corrected that with this language, along with some other changes that we see fit. In relation to historical horse racing has been around for about 25 years now. It started in the town of Hot Springs, Arkansas, where they had a racetrack there that was struggling. And in the 25 years since they've installed these machines, they now race 5 months out of the year from December to late April. And their race meet culminates with one of the premier qualifying races to the Kentucky Derby in the middle of April, and tens of thousands of people come to the races there to watch that race. Since then, there's been several other states that have utilized historical horse racing as a way to support the live racing industry, Virginia being one. Even Kentucky, the thoroughbred capital of the world, has historical horse racing machines that help support the industry. So what we're doing here is not something that is unique. In fact, the state of Wyoming roughly 10 years ago passed legislation very similar to this. And at that time when they passed it, there was no live racing in the state. Since then, a study was done a year ago, and that state now has $150 million of economic impact related to the racing industry. Along with that, they are opening their 4th racetrack in the state this year. And so they've seen phenomenal growth with the industry in a relatively short amount of time. It's our opinion that we think Kansas can do much better than Wyoming for 2 reasons. One, we are very close to the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma boasts over $500 million of economic impact with the live racing industry that they have in the state. And there's folks down there that are very keen to know what Kansas is going to do. Every time we're down there at a race meet or at a horse sale, it's what are we doing in Kansas? I'm ready to come, I'm ready to bring some horses up there. So we feel like the proximity to a horse state will benefit us. And the other thing that I feel like is important to understand, and it was mentioned, the rich racing history that's in the state. There was an economic study done a few years ago, and the author of that, on the equine industry in Kansas, and the author of that study used the term historical inertia. And I didn't really understand what that meant, but what he was trying to do was describe why the state of Kansas still had a lot of foals being born in the state despite not having live racing. Kansas has the most quarter horse foals born for any state that doesn't have live racing. And this idea of historical inertia is there was a fire lit a long time ago, and there's still ash that is warm. It just needs a little bit of fuel to restart that fire and take off. Specifically related to the language I will add, there is, when the Golden Circle opens, if this legislation doesn't pass, Kansas will be one of 2 states that doesn't have live racing in the state that has historical horse racing. New Hampshire is the other state that has historical racing without live racing. We're clearly more of an equine state than New Hampshire. The Horse Racing Fair Benefit Fund that we're talking about today was started in 1992. And the intention of this fund was to support the small racetracks in the state. At the time, the Woodlands in Kansas City and the Wichita Greyhound Park in Wichita were operational. And a part of the parimutuel revenue that came from those facilities was used to support Eureka and Anthony. This is essentially what we're doing with the historical horse racing revenue rather than the live horse racing revenue that no longer exists. So a lot of what we're talking about here is not unique to us, and I encourage you all to support this. When the racetracks in Eureka and Anthony and Woodlands closed, obviously a lot of fond memories were generated, and to see those go was a disappointment. And obviously, we want to get that back. So that being said, I would ask you guys to support the equine industry here in the state, and I would ask for you to support Senate Bill 260. And hopefully we'll see you at the races soon.
Thank you, Kurt. Committee, that concludes the in-person oral testimony. We do have 6 people who have submitted written-only proponent testimony. There are no opponents. There's no neutral testimony on this. So at this time, I'll open it up to questions from the committee. Senator Gossage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think probably my question is best to Jason. And when I'm reading through the fiscal note, I don't see that there is a fiscal note in that these funds would be going directly to the horse racing from the historical horse racing. Just want to make sure I'm looking at that correctly.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the only note I see with respect to state revenues would be at the bottom of page 2 of the fiscal note, where it's noted that changing the distribution of excess parimutuel tax receipts not needed to regulate the industry has the potential to reduce revenues to the Attracting Professional Sports in Kansas Fund by unknown amounts beginning in fiscal year 2027. So not even a precise number in terms of the impact on state revenues.
Thank you, Jason.
Committee, any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you. The last proponent talked about the changes that were made at the request, I think, of the governor's office to make sure that the operating expenditures are being covered. So is there, I mean, is operating expenditures what we're referring to as the funds that would be needed to oversee this? perhaps you can.
I'll have Jason, well, maybe Jason or Kurt, either one who wants to answer that one. Jason first, and then Kurt can.
Yeah, Senator, if I understand your question, the first amount of tax money goes to racing and gaming to cover their agents and the folks back in the office here in Topeka that are overseeing the Golden Circle, everything that's involved in that. Whatever that cost is will come out of that tax revenue, and it's the remaining amount that then gets split up 70-30 between those funds. Does that answer your question?
I think my question was really, that's what is being referred to as operating expenditures, because it says in excess of the amount required for operating expenditures. And to me, operating expenditures does not necessarily mean regulatory expenditures, and I don't see that it's defined in the bill.
It is for oversight. We don't get to cover our operating expenses out of the tax revenue. Just to be clear, and I think the reviser can probably speak to that, but if there may be a little issue there with terminology, but what that is referring to in the bill is the cost of oversight by racing and gaming, which is why the bill got vetoed last year. The tax money is supposed to cover oversight, and then you do with it whatever you will. The bill last year had the 70-30 split from 100% of the tax revenue, and the Golden Circle therefore would have been double taxed.
That helps me.
Okay.
Your question.
Okay. Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, would you be acceptable that we cleared up that?
I think the reviser may have some input here.
Jason, if you have, it may be in the statute somewhere.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, within this statute, pages 6 and 7, on page 6 and line 37, it directs that all operating expenses of the commission and monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing appropriated by the legislature shall be paid from the state racing fund. And so then in the new language on page 7, when it refers to the amount required for operating expenditures, that is referencing back the operating expenses of the commission that are paid first from the state racing fund, and then the 30% of the remaining monies would be credited under that paragraph 1 on page 7, and 70% to the horse fair racing benefit fund under paragraph 2.
Senator Tyson, does that answer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, is there going to be a check and balance on it? They just turn in the receipts and they get reimbursed no matter what they turn in, or how is that going to work?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, standard practice would be for the commission to certify to the Director of Accounts and Reports the amount that is to be credited from the state racing fund to these other horse breeding and horse fair racing benefit funds. And so once the commission has determined its operating expenses that are be paid first, it will certify the remaining balance from those tax revenues, and that amount would then be credited to the two funds pursuant to the statute.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Jason, you made a comment when you were testifying about the Constitution, the tax. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, the tax, so parimutuel is different than casino gaming. You created that through, you created KELA through statute. Parimutuel was created through a constitutional amendment. And so the tax is in the Constitution says a minimum of 1%, maximum of 3%.
Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate this discussion of operating expenditures, but Jason had us look at the wording on page 6, and it talks about all operating expenses of the commission and monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound. So maybe we could change that "and" to "including" and make those part of the operating expenses, so then when it's referred to, both things and not just the operating expenses. So that's one thing we might want to look at.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Fasquedo? No questions, okay. This must be the snow and the cold. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, I think we will close the hearing then on Senate Bill 260. And again, as indicated by Senator Tyson, since time is short in the session before turnaround, we are going to go ahead and try to work this bill. And rather than have Jason do a review, I think we have an amendment first that will, Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some concern about working the bill today, especially when we have amendments that weren't seen by the general public. I don't have or have not had an opportunity to hear any more about the limitation to Sedgwick County. I think it'd be good to share that amendment as part of the discussion, but just am concerned about working the bill today.
Jason, I'll go ahead and have you. And then, if there's further, concern, we can come back to it, but let's see what we can get done here. So Jason, I'll have you go ahead and explain the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the amendment that was just distributed does clarify, as Mr. Watkins pointed out, that the horsemen's associations and the horsemen's nonprofit organizations would not be authorized to operate historical horse race machines, that would be limited as under current law just to that one facility in Sedgwick County. And so you can see an amendment on page 6 specifying that to obtain an organization license, the horsemen's nonprofit organization would not operate a historical horse race machine. There, an amendment to line 7. And then for horsemen's associations which obtain facility owner or facility manager licenses, the amendment would bring in KSA 74-8815, which is shown on attachment A. And on page 2 of the attachment at the top there, you can see a new subsection H that specifies that the applicant for a facility owner license or facility manager license that is a horsemen's association would not operate historical horse race machines at the racetrack facility.
Committee, any questions for Jason on the amendment? Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding is this would limit, or the idea was this would limit it to one location in Sedgwick County, and if so, what's the wording that makes that limitation?
Jason?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the definition of, or the provisions relating to historical horse racing itself limited to Sedgwick County under current law, and that was part of the legislation that was enacted authorizing the historical horse race machines. I believe the concern was by removing the location restrictions for the definitions of the Horsemen's Association and nonprofit organizations, there was an opportunity for them to then operate a racetrack facility within Sedgwick County. And so by adding these restrictions on operating historical horse race machines, then if those organizations did operate a racetrack facility in Sedgwick County, they would not be authorized to operate historical horse race machines at those racetrack facilities. It would still be reserved just to the one facility that has already obtained the license to do so under the previously enacted legislation.
Well, so I'm understanding that the limitation is not to the racing, the limitation is to where you can have the historical horse race machines.
That is correct.
Okay. Committee, any other questions? And I believe, Senator Fasquedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, so, and that's at the Greyhound Park.
Yes, it's at the facility that was former Wichita Greyhound Park.
Thank you.
In Park City, I think. Yeah. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, do I have a motion on this? Senator Thomas.
Yeah, I'll move this amendment.
Senator Thomas with a motion to move the amendment, second by Senator Fasquedo. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The motion carries. We're back on the base bill. Senate Bill 260. Any further discussion on this bill? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I still have my question about operating expenses and monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing versus the limitations that the amount required for operating expenditures. And we could say operating expenditures of the commission. We might need to say that that's including money for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing. So I'm still a little, I want to make sure that the understanding is both of those should be paid for before the 70% and the 30% go to the racing funds.
Both the operating expenses and the regulatory expenses are paid first. Is that your concern?
Well, no, I think our revisor has said is using operating expenses to refer back to what's happening on page 6, which says, except as otherwise, all operating expenses of the commission. But then it also says, and monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing. It says appropriated by the legislature shall be paid from the fund. But then there's not that same, it's only operating expenses that are restricted, or all the funds in excess of the amount required for operating expenses. 30% is credited and 70%. So I'm trying to figure out where this money for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing comes from.
The end result, basically. Yeah, okay. I think I see what you're saying. Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think it refers back to Section D with the statutes listed in, I believe, KSA 748813. So I think that should clarify, maybe if Jason wants to run through that statute, but I believe it tails back to that statute which describes how all the expenses are paid. So I think we're fine personally in this language.
Jason, do you need a minute to look that over? I'm looking it up myself right now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I believe the language on page 6 indicates two different expenditures to be paid from the state racing fund, the operating expenses of the commission, and separately monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing. The language is new on page 7 refers to the amount required for operating expenditures. So I believe the intent of the legislation as written is that only those operating expenditures of the commission are to be paid first prior to the distribution of the rest of the monies from the historical horse race tax revenue. That monies for the promotion of horse and greyhound racing would come from other revenue sources that are paid into the state racing fund, as there would be other revenues from wagering, admissions taxes, applications fees, license fees, and fine amounts are all additionally paid into the state racing fund. If the committee requires clarification on operating expenditures that are to be paid prior to the distribution of those historical horse race tax revenues, perhaps on page 7 in both paragraphs, there would be language, the amount required for operating expenditures of the commission in regulating historical horse race machines would clarify what operating expenditures are to be paid before the distribution of the remaining tax revenues. I leave that to the discretion of the committee.
Senator Tyson.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Senator Francisco's attention to detail on this. However, I don't think we want to change what we're looking at, because I really don't want to cover the marketing and all of those expenses. I just think operating expenses is what the intent is. And so I'd kind of like to leave it there. Maybe we can come back if we need to, but not trying to kill the bill or anything, just trying to get the conversation going.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems as though from testimony and the written testimony, there are a lot of different organizations, factions, the commission, that have all come together and worked to put this together. And I feel like I'm ready to vote. I feel like if they've all worked out their concerns, that I think that's more than what this committee needs to do.
Any further? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was really just asking whether that was intended or not. And so I think my understanding is it was not intended. I would appreciate the wording suggested by the reviser on page 7 in both D1 and 2 to just say operating expenditures of the commission.
So it would read on lines 8 and 9, of the monies in the state racing fund in excess of the amount required for operating expenditures of the commission, comma, 30% of such monies. And I would accept a conceptual amendment to do that, because I don't think that changes the intent of the bill at all.
And the same thing then on line 17.
Line 17.
And that helps me understand
Clearly where the money is going to go.
expenditures could be broader. But I also appreciate the discussion, because I didn't know where that promotion stuff was supposed to come from.
Totally understand. Committee, so we'll accept that. Do you move your conceptual amendment then? Okay.
I moved the conceptual amendment
Which would add
expense of the commission.
Of the commission.
After expenses.
On line 9 and on line 17. Correct, Jason? And Senator Gossage.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I believe there's somebody that might be present from the commission that could perhaps speak to this, if that's all right.
Sure. Do we have somebody from the Lottery Gaming Commission on that, or horse racing? I don't see anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. What's that? Oh, yeah. If you can step up to the mic real fast.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The question is, we're just trying to put clarifying language in here, an amendment that the racing fund in excess of the amount required for operating expenses of the commission, the clarifying language in there that just basically clarifies that any money in excess of the operating expenses of the commission then goes to these two different funds. Do you think there's any clarification needed, or do you think that would?
I don't think there would be any clarification needed. I think what the reviser has stated is good, and that it's for operating costs for the commission, and those costs come out of those funds beforehand, and funded by statutorily requirements.
Senator Francisco.
Would you have any objection to defining those as operating expenditures of the commission?
I don't think we have any input there or anything like that. So yeah, I don't think we have any objection.
Just some clarifying language, I think.
Yeah, I don't think.
Okay. It's not an emergency. No. Okay. Thank you. Senator Gossage, do you have any follow-up there?
No, I just wanted to know if the commission felt that it was necessary.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any further discussion? I think we have a motion by Senator Francisco. Did we get a second? We have not received a second on that clarifying language. A second by Senator Fasquedo. Any further discussion? All those, Senator Thomas.
I guess my concern would be, we have agreed upon language, we have clarification, and now we're amending it, which I'm not sure I'm going to support this amendment, just because we have agreed upon language. In the essence of compromise, I think we have clarification on the expenses and where they go. So I honestly don't feel like this amendment is necessary.
Okay. Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the good senator's comments. I'm going to be supporting this amendment because it just clarifies. It may be redundant, but it does clarify where the money goes, and I think and it's our job to read through these and dig through the details. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions? So we have a motion by Senator Francisco, second by Senator Fasquedo. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no? No. I think the ayes have it, I believe. We are back on the base bill. Committee, any other discussion on Senate Bill 260? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion, if there is one. Senator Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out Senate Bill 260 favorably as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Clifford. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to abstain, and because we're working an amended bill the same day of the hearing and with several amendments.
I understand. I believe the ayes have it, and so Senate Bill 260 will go to the floor. Committee, thanks for the work. Thanks for the detail. I appreciate the discussion. That is all we have today, and we will see you after turnaround and all the fun stuff. We are adjourned.